Title: After my wife left me for my boss. When my wife left me for my boss, it wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation wrapped in laughter. "Real men don't cry like babies," she said, as they threw me out of my own house. That night, I slept in my car under the Texas rain, wondering how my life had shattered so fast. But I didn't know that the same sky above my windshield was already holding a secret worth $280 million. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Hit like, subscribe, and stay till the end. This story gets unbelievable. My name is Jacob Martinez, 34 years old, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. Before everything collapsed, I thought I had life figured out. I had a steady job as a mechanical engineer for Caldwell Construction, one of the biggest firms in the city. I wasn't rich, but I was proud of what I built: a 2-story house in the suburbs, a loving wife, and the promise of stability. My wife's name was Melissa. We met in college. She studied marketing. I studied machines. She used to say I smelled like metal and honesty. I guess both eventually rusted. For 8 years, we built what I thought was a good marriage: date nights on Fridays, movie marathons on Sundays, and plans to start a family once we were more financially secure. Then there was Ryan Caldwell, my boss. A man in his 40s, polished, charming, with that kind of easy confidence people mistake for leadership. Everyone admired him. He was the kind of guy who could make a whole room laugh while stealing their wallet. I used to look up to him, until he took everything from me. It started subtly. Melissa joined one of the company's PR projects and began spending more time around Ryan. She'd come home talking about how motivating he was, how ambitious people like him didn't settle for ordinary lives. I brushed it off. I wanted to trust her. You don't marry someone expecting betrayal. You marry believing you'll be enough. One Friday, Ryan sent me to inspect a project site 3 hours away. I left before dawn. But halfway there, I got a call. The client had canceled. I turned around and came home earlier than expected. When I opened the front door, the air felt wrong. The lights were dim. The faint smell of perfume floated in the hallway. Her perfume. I remember hearing laughter. Then voices. Then silence. When I pushed open the bedroom door, my world cracked open. Melissa and Ryan froze. The sheets told the rest of the story. "Jacob," she said, grabbing the blanket to cover herself. "Don't be dramatic." I just stood there, shaking. "Don't be dramatic?" Ryan, still half-dressed, looked at me with that smug calmness he always carried. "Look, man, things happen. Don't make this worse for yourself." That line, "for yourself," burned into me like acid. For myself? They were in my house, on my bed, and he said for myself? I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. My body just went cold. Melissa's expression shifted from guilt to annoyance. "You're crying?" she scoffed. "Real men don't cry like babies, Jacob. Maybe that's your problem. You never acted like a man." Ryan smirked. "You'll be fine, Martinez. Take a few days off." When I didn't move, Melissa pointed at the door. "Just go." I left. I didn't even grab my wallet or laptop, just my car keys. The sound of their laughter followed me outside. It was late afternoon, the sky gray and heavy. I sat in my car, numb, watching the windows of my house glow with light that used to mean warmth. Now it was just noise. I drove aimlessly, not caring where I went. At one point, I stopped at a gas station and realized I had nowhere to go. No family nearby, no close friends. My father had died when I was 10. My mother had passed a few years back. Melissa had been my home. So that night, I slept in my car for the first time. It wasn't as terrible as it sounds. The hum of the engine kept me warm, and exhaustion replaced pain. But when morning came, the sunlight through the windshield felt cruel. I checked my phone. 12 missed calls from unknown numbers. One voicemail. Ryan's voice. "Jacob, I'm sorry you saw that, but I need to be clear. You're no longer with Caldwell Construction. Let's not make this ugly. Be professional about it." Professional. That word felt like a knife. Over the next few days, I tried to reason with Melissa, but she wouldn't answer. When I went back to the house, a police officer told me I wasn't welcome on the property. Ryan had transferred the ownership papers into his name. Apparently, Melissa signed over my share in exchange for marital compensation. They'd taken not just my wife and job, but the roof over my head. For the first time in my life, I felt truly invisible. I tried finding work at smaller firms, but word spread quickly. Ryan called around, labeling me emotionally unstable and unreliable. The construction industry in Dallas was smaller than people thought. No one wanted the guy who cried over a woman. So I stopped trying. I parked behind a strip mall, near a laundromat that closed at midnight. I'd brush my teeth in their restroom, eat instant noodles, and watch the world move without me. Sometimes I'd see couples laughing inside the diner across the street, and my chest would ache in quiet envy. But every night, before I fell asleep, I'd whisper a promise. You'll get up again, Jacob. You'll get up again. I didn't know how or when, but deep inside, a small ember refused to die. It would take months, an old stranger, and a buried family secret to finally reignite it. It had been 3 months since I'd last slept in a real bed. Most mornings, I'd wake to the sound of car engines and pigeons scratching at the roof of my old Toyota. I lived mostly off gas station coffee and whatever I could afford from the dollar menu. The car had become my apartment, my shelter, and my coffin all in one. That morning began like any other: gray sky, dew on the windshield, a quiet ache behind my eyes. I had parked behind a supermarket lot on the outskirts of Dallas, next to a row of dumpsters. The smell wasn't great, but at least no one bothered me there. I was half awake when I heard it, a soft knock on the glass. 3 gentle taps. My first thought was the cops. My second was that maybe someone wanted me to move. But when I rolled down the window, I froze. Standing outside was an elderly woman. She must have been in her late 70s, maybe early 80s. She wore a long gray coat buttoned all the way up, her silver hair tied neatly in a bun. There was something strangely dignified about her, like someone who had lived through every decade and collected its wisdom in her eyes. She smiled faintly. "Are you David Martinez?" Her voice was soft but firm, like she'd practiced that question many times. I frowned. No, ma'am. My name's Jacob. Jacob Martinez." She looked at me for a long second, as if studying my face. Then her smile widened just slightly. "Then it's you," she said quietly. Before I could ask what she meant, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. The seal bore an old crest, a shield with an engraved letter M. She extended it toward me with trembling fingers. "This belongs to you," she said. "From your grandfather." I blinked. "My grandfather?" She nodded. "Eduardo Martinez. He passed away 3 months ago in California. I was asked to find you and give you this." I hesitated. My grandfather? I barely remembered the man. My mother never talked about him, and I thought he'd died when I was a kid. The last time I'd seen him, I was maybe 6. He'd visited once, given me a toy car, then disappeared from our lives completely. "This must be a mistake," I said. "I don't have any contact with." "Open it," she interrupted gently. Inside the envelope was a letter typed on old stationery with the heading Grayson and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Carmel, California. To Mr. Jacob Martinez. This letter serves as formal notice that you are the sole surviving heir of the late Mr. Eduardo Martinez, your grandfather. Per his final testament, you have been granted ownership of the Martinez estate located in Carmel by the Sea, California, along with associated assets, including 1 Mercedes-Benz S-Class vehicle, 2 registered maritime vessels, and a trust fund containing $280 million. $280 million. However, in accordance with the terms of the will, the estate and trust may only be fully claimed upon completion of a specified condition. You must uncover and present the secret the Martinez family buried 60 years ago. Please contact the office at your earliest convenience to arrange transfer proceedings. Sincerely, Mr. Harold Grayson, ESQ. I read it twice. Then a third time. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It sounded ridiculous. A mansion? 2 yachts? $280 million? I was a man who hadn't even had a warm shower in weeks. "This is insane," I said. "You must have the wrong person." "I'm not. This isn't real." The woman in gray didn't react. She reached into her coat again and pulled out an old black and white photograph. It showed a man, my grandfather, younger, standing proudly beside a vintage car. Beside him, holding a baby, was my mother. And that baby, it looked exactly like me. The air went still. "Your mother never wanted you to know," she said softly. "Your grandfather was a complicated man. But he loved you, Jacob. Everything he built, he left for you." "Why me?" I whispered. "Because the truth must come full circle," she said. I wanted to ask her what that meant, but she was already turning away. Her movements were slow but deliberate, like someone who had said everything she was allowed to. Wait, I called out. Who are you? How do you know all this? She turned back once more, her gray eyes glinting in the morning light. Some debts take a lifetime to repay, she said, and some families hide more than money. And with that, she walked away, down the empty parking lot, her coat fluttering like smoke in the wind. By the time I got out of the car to follow her, she had vanished. No trace. For a long moment, I just stood there holding the letter, the photo trembling in my hands. The world around me seemed to fade, the sound of traffic, the smell of asphalt, even the weight of my misery. All I could see was the old crest stamped in red wax and the name Eduardo Martinez. I sat back in my seat, staring at the horizon. Part of me wanted to tear the letter apart. The other part, the part that had been buried under exhaustion and heartbreak, whispered something else. What if it's true? The sun had started to rise, painting the sky with gold and pink. I unfolded the letter one last time, tracing the signature with my thumb. Carmel, California, I read aloud. Fine, Grandpa. Let's see what kind of ghost story you left behind. As I turned the ignition and the car engine coughed to life, a strange feeling washed over me. Not joy, not disbelief, but something deeper. Hope. It had been months since I'd felt it. And somewhere between Dallas and the Pacific coast, I knew I'd find either a miracle or the final punchline to my life's cruel joke. I left Dallas 2 days later. Everything I owned fit into one duffel bag in the trunk of my battered Toyota. Before hitting the road, I stopped by the same gas station where I'd spent most of my nights. The clerk, a kind woman named Tammy who used to slip me free sandwiches after closing, looked at me with concern. Heading somewhere better, Jacob? She asked. I hope so, I said, forcing a smile. California. She nodded slowly. Long drive. You got people there. I hesitated. Maybe. Or ghosts. She handed me a fresh cup of coffee, steaming and strong. Then go find them. Don't let the past chain you down forever. Her words followed me as I merged onto Interstate 10, the city fading in my rearview mirror. Dallas had become a graveyard of memories, every street corner reminding me of who I used to be. Out there, on the open highway, I felt weightless for the first time in months. The first few hours were quiet, just the hum of the tires and the whisper of the wind through the cracked windows. The air smelled of asphalt, dust, and freedom. I drove west through the endless stretch of Texas plains, watching the landscape slowly shift from flat grasslands to rugged desert. At night, I pulled over by roadside motels, sleeping in the car rather than paying for a room. The stars out there looked close enough to touch, and I found myself talking to them, like maybe my grandfather could hear. Eduardo, I whispered once, testing the name. What did you bury 60 years ago? The question haunted me more with each passing mile. Somewhere near El Paso, I stopped at a diner called the Desert Spoon, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like engine oil and the waitresses call you Han. I took a seat at the counter, ordered bacon and eggs, and unfolded the old letter again. That's when a voice from the next stool said, "You one of the Martinez boys?" I turned. The man was in his 60s, wearing a trucker's cap and a denim jacket that had seen better days. His eyes were pale blue and sharp. I guess you could say that, I replied cautiously. You know the name? He chuckled, shaking his head. Know it. Son, your family used to own half the coastline up near Carmel. Big white mansion on the cliffs, right? Folks around there still tell stories about it. Place has been empty for years. Some say it's cursed. Cursed? I raised an eyebrow. Yeah. They say old Eduardo Martinez built his fortune on something dark. Government work. Secret contracts. Then one day, poof, he disappears. Just like that. Left behind rumors of treasure and betrayal. I leaned forward. You ever meet him? Nah, but my daddy hauled lumber to that estate once. Said Eduardo was a genius, but haunted, like a man who knew too much. The man finished his coffee, dropped a few bills on the counter, and stood up. If you're going there, son, be careful what you dig up. Some secrets don't stay buried without reason. When he left, the waitress refilled my cup and gave me a sympathetic smile. That man loves his ghost stories, she said. Don't let him scare you. But as I stared at the dark liquid swirling in my mug, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was right. I drove through New Mexico that evening, through long stretches of desert painted gold by the setting sun. The road shimmered with heat, and mirages danced on the horizon like whispers from another world. Somewhere near Tucson, I pulled over to rest. I took out the old photo again, the one the woman in gray had given me. My mother, my grandfather, the baby that looked like me. I turned it over and noticed, for the first time, faint writing on the back. In faded ink, someone had written, "Carmel, under the sunrise." I frowned. The same phrase that appeared in one of my grandfather's letters later on, though I didn't know that yet. It felt like a message, a breadcrumb pointing toward something bigger. When I finally crossed into California, I rolled down the window and let the coastal air fill my lungs. The scent of salt and pine trees washed over me, clean and unfamiliar. The sky had softened into a hazy gold, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. As I climbed the winding road toward Carmel by the sea, the Pacific Ocean stretched out to my left, endless and shimmering. My GPS announced, destination ahead. There it was, the Martinez estate. The mansion rose at the end of a long gravel driveway, framed by cypress trees that swayed in the ocean wind. Even from a distance, it looked both magnificent and forgotten, a monument to a legacy that time had tried to erase. The paint had faded, the iron gates were rusted, and ivy crawled up the stone walls like veins. Yet beneath the decay, I could see the bones of beauty, arched windows, Spanish tiles, balconies overlooking the sea. My heart thudded as I stepped out of the car. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the place my bloodline had built and abandoned. I thought of Melissa, how she'd laughed when she told me real men don't cry. And there I was, eyes burning, standing before a mansion worth more than she could ever imagine. "Guess I'm crying all the way to the ocean now," I muttered, half laughing through tears. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about answers. Somewhere in those walls was a story that began long before I was born, a story my mother had kept hidden and my grandfather had died protecting. As the waves crashed against the cliffs below, I whispered to the wind, "Okay, Grandpa, I'm here. Let's find your secret." The house stood silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for me to step inside. The mansion stood before me like a sleeping giant, draped in ivy and silence. The salty wind from the Pacific swept through the cracked gates, carrying the scent of seaweed and rust. I pushed them open, the hinges crying out like they hadn't been touched in decades. A black sedan waited in the circular driveway. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, his posture sharp and his expression politely unreadable. "Mr. Jacob Martinez?" he asked, his voice crisp. "That's me." He extended a hand. "Harold Grayson, attorney for the estate of your grandfather, Eduardo Martinez. I appreciate you coming all this way." His handshake was firm, professional, the kind of grip that came from a life spent in expensive suits and air-conditioned offices. He gestured toward the mansion. "Everything you see here is legally yours," he said. "Pending fulfillment of the will's condition, of course." "That condition again," I said. "The secret buried 60 years ago. What does that even mean?" He gave a thin smile. "Your grandfather was a complex man. His instructions were deliberately vague. But I believe the answer lies within the property itself. He wanted you to find it, not inherit it blindly." He handed me a folder with several documents, deed transfers, estate inventories, access keys. Then, as if reciting a script, he added, "The estate is valued at approximately $37 million in property alone. The vehicles, yachts, and offshore accounts are separate. The trust fund remains locked until the condition is met." I stared at the papers, my fingers trembling slightly. It all looked official, signatures, stamps, legal jargon. For the first time, the impossible began to feel real. "Would you like a tour?" Grayson asked. I nodded. We stepped inside through a pair of massive oak doors. The interior smelled of dust, old wood, and faint traces of salt. Light filtered through stained glass windows, scattering colors across the marble floor. The foyer was lined with portraits, generations of Martinez men and women staring down from gilded frames. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I walked. "Your grandfather was an inventor," Grayson explained. "He designed machines, early prototypes of automation systems, and held several patents. Some say he contributed to confidential government projects during the 1950s. I ran my hand along the dusty banister. "Then why did he disappear?" Grayson's gaze lingered on one of the portraits. "Officially? Illness. Unofficially? No one knows. He vanished one night, left everything behind. No body was ever found. We passed a study lined with bookshelves reaching the ceiling. A massive desk dominated the room, scattered with yellowed papers and old blueprints. This was his office, Grayson said. He worked here until the very end. The room has been untouched since his disappearance. I noticed one corner of the room was sealed off by a heavy wooden door with an antique lock. What's in there? Grayson hesitated. The servants used to say it was his private workshop. No one ever had the key. Perhaps you'll find it somewhere in the house. When he left me to explore on my own, I stood alone in that echoing silence, feeling like an intruder in my own bloodline. I wandered through the mansion, through grand halls filled with antique furniture, ornate chandeliers, and dust-thick rugs that muffled my footsteps. Each room whispered fragments of memory. In one of the bedrooms, I found a cracked mirror. My reflection looked like a stranger, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, the ghost of the man I used to be. In another room, an old gramophone sat on a table beside a faded photograph of my mother as a child. She was smiling, holding a music box shaped like a golden sun. Beneath it, a note in elegant handwriting read, El secreto está bajo el sol del amanecer. The secret lies beneath the sunrise. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The phrase matched the one I'd seen on the back of the old photograph during my drive. Coincidence? I didn't think so. I pocketed the note and wound the music box. A soft tune filled the room, delicate, haunting. As the melody played, I heard a faint click beneath the floorboards, like metal shifting. I knelt down and pressed my ear against the wood. Another click, deeper this time. I pried open one of the loose planks. Dust and cobwebs spilled out, and something else. A small brass key. I turned it in my hand, noticing the engraving, Yem. Eduardo Martinez. Heart pounding, I rushed back to the study. The heavy wooden door loomed before me like a challenge. I inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The hinges groaned as the door creaked open, revealing darkness. The smell hit first, old metal, oil, and time. I stepped inside, flicking on the light switch. A single bulb buzzed to life overhead. It wasn't a workshop. It was a vault of secrets. Blueprints covered the walls, schematics of strange devices labeled in both English and Spanish. There were files marked confidential, U.S. Defense Department, and reels of 16mm film stacked neatly on a table. And in the center of the room, a steel hatch built into the floor. A faded label on it read, Sub-basement access. I crouched beside it. The lock was rusted but intact. On the wall above, my grandfather's photograph hung crooked, his eyes staring straight into mine. Beneath the sunrise, I whispered, recalling the words. I turned the brass key again. This time it clicked twice. The hatch groaned and popped open an inch, releasing a gust of cold, stale air from below. For a long moment, I just stood there, caught between fear and curiosity. Every instinct screamed to stop, but something stronger pulled me forward. If the past had destroyed my life, maybe the truth hidden under my grandfather's floorboards could finally rebuild it. I reached for a flashlight from a nearby workbench, aimed it down the black opening, and took the first step into the unknown. The stairs creaked under my boots as I descended into darkness. The deeper I went, the colder the air became, thick with the smell of dust, metal, and something faintly electrical. My flashlight beam cut through the black, catching glimpses of pipes, old wiring, and walls lined with faded blueprints. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a concrete chamber, a hidden laboratory frozen in time. Machines with dials and glass tubes stood like sleeping skeletons. A long metal table stretched across the center of the room, covered with scattered tools, journals, and rusted typewriter sheets. I ran my hand along one of the machines. A layer of dust clung to my fingers. A single word was engraved into the metal plate. Project Sunrise. The same word from the note. The same word whispered in the music box. My heart pounded. Whatever my grandfather had hidden, this was the core of it. A soft crackle startled me. I turned toward the sound. A tape recorder, old and square, sat on a nearby shelf, its reel still half-threaded. I pressed the play button. The device hissed to life, and a deep, trembling voice filled the cellar. If you're hearing this, you must be family. I froze. This is Eduardo Martinez. The world believes I died in 1963. They're wrong. I went into hiding because the truth I uncovered was too dangerous. They wanted my invention, and they were willing to kill for it. His voice faltered, followed by the sound of lab equipment clinking in the background. Project Sunrise was never meant for profit or war. It was for preservation, for our bloodline. I created something that could rewrite history, literally. But I failed to protect it. Static cut through the message for several seconds before it returned. If you are my descendant, you must find the second key. It's buried in the chapel on the hill, beneath the stone marked for Maria. Only then will you understand what our family has guarded for 60 years. The tape clicked off. I stood there stunned. Rewrite history? What did he mean by that? My grandfather wasn't just an inventor. He was a man running from something far bigger than I'd imagined. I opened one of the nearby journals. The pages were filled with diagrams, machines connected to symbols that looked both mechanical and astronomical. Notes scribbled in Spanish described something called temporal displacement field. My breath caught. It looked like my grandfather was trying to manipulate time. Another notebook contained newspaper clippings from the 1960s, headlines about a missing scientist, unexplained electrical blackouts, government cover-ups, and a fatal car crash near San Diego, my grandfather's supposed death. On the last page, a letter addressed simply to my grandson rested under a brass compass. I unfolded it carefully. Jacob, if you are reading this, it means fate has found you. The truth is buried deeper than the vault you stand in. Our family's fortune was built on something borrowed, something that doesn't belong to this world. Find Maria's stone, and you will find redemption for us all. Yem. A noise echoed above me. A faint creak, like footsteps on the floorboards. My pulse spiked. Hello. I called out. No answer. I turned off my flashlight, plunging the room into darkness, and listened. The sound came again, slow, deliberate steps moving across the study above. Then silence. I climbed the stairs quietly, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. When I reached the main floor, the front door stood slightly ajar. The papers I'd left on the table were scattered, and the music box was gone. Someone had been here. I rushed to the window. A black car rolled down the long driveway, its headlights cutting through the fog. My stomach dropped. It was the same sedan I'd seen earlier when the attorney first arrived. But Harold Grayson was nowhere to be found. A chill ran through me. I wasn't just inheriting money or property. I'd inherited a war I didn't understand. I grabbed my jacket and the letter, locked the cellar behind me, and ran outside into the coastal night. The sky was dark, heavy with clouds, but far in the distance, I could see a faint glow on the hill, the outline of an old chapel, the place my grandfather had mentioned. Beneath the stone marked for Maria, I whispered. My mother's name was Maria. I started walking. The gravel crunched under my boots as I climbed the winding hill. Each step felt heavier than the last, burdened with questions I wasn't ready to face. The wind howled through the cypress trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear my grandfather's voice in the rustling leaves. When I reached the chapel, the moon slipped through the clouds, illuminating the ancient stone structure. The door creaked open easily, revealing rows of dusty pews and shattered stained glass. At the far end, a single gravestone leaned against the altar. Carved into it were the words, Maria Martinez, 1943 to 1962. Beloved daughter. I knelt before it, tracing the engraved letters with my fingers. My mother died when I was a child. My father had told me it was an accident. But seeing her name here, in this place my grandfather had sealed away, something didn't feel right. Then I saw it. An indentation at the base of the stone, half buried in dirt. I brushed the soil away and found a small, brass cylinder sealed with wax. Inside was another note and a second key, identical to the one that opened the workshop. The note read, The past is a mirror. To claim what is yours, face what you have denied. Return to the mansion at dawn. The same phrase again, beneath the sunrise. As I pocketed the key, the chapel door slammed shut behind me. Someone, or something, was out there. The road back to the mansion was swallowed by fog. My breath came in shallow bursts as I drove, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The second key felt heavy in my pocket, like it was alive, pulsing with meaning I didn't yet understand. By the time I reached the estate, the first blush of dawn was creeping over the horizon. The mansion loomed ahead, silent and waiting. The air was still, too still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I parked near the fountain and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots. The ocean glimmered faintly in the distance. For a fleeting second, I remembered the last words of my grandfather's letter. Return to the mansion at dawn. I unlocked the front doors and stepped inside. The house felt different, charged, humming faintly with something unseen. Dust motes floated in the thin morning light. I moved straight to the study and pulled open the hatch to the cellar. The cold air hit me again, but this time I wasn't afraid. I descended the steps quickly, flashlight in one hand, the second key in the other. At the bottom, I found a small metal panel built into the wall beside the hatch I had opened the night before. It had 2 keyholes, perfectly aligned. 2 keys, I whispered. The first, the one from the floorboard, fit into the left slot. The second, from my mother's gravestone, slid into the right. When I turned them both simultaneously, the wall shuddered. A low grinding sound echoed through the cellar. Dust fell from the ceiling as a section of the concrete wall slowly pulled back, revealing a circular steel door behind it, its surface engraved with a rising sun. Project Sunrise. My heart hammered in my chest. I pushed the door open. It hissed, releasing a gust of stale, chilled air that smelled faintly of ozone. The chamber inside was unlike anything else in the house. Polished metal walls, strange humming machines, and in the center, a glass pod the size of a coffin. Wires and glowing circuits pulsed faintly around it, like veins of light. A small console beside it displayed a flickering message. Authorization required. Martinez access only. I stepped closer. On the console was a faded fingerprint panel. Out of instinct, I placed my hand on it. To my shock, the system beeped and the words changed. DNA match, partial. Descendant access granted. The pod emitted a low hum and the glass fogged up, then cleared, revealing something inside. A man. Old, frail, but unmistakably alive. His face was sunken, his hair silver and thin. But I recognized him instantly, from photographs, from the portraits in the hall. Eduardo Martinez. My grandfather. I stumbled backward. No, this can't be real. A monitor above the pod flickered to life, showing a recorded video. The same voice from the tape filled the room, older, weaker. If you are here, then you found both keys. Good. That means you are ready. The camera angle shifted, showing my grandfather sitting in this same chamber, decades younger. I failed my family once, Jacob. I created a machine that could freeze life, a preservation field meant to hold a body in stasis until the world was ready for what we discovered. But the government wanted to weaponize it. They called it Project Sunrise, because it could bring back anything lost to the darkness. He coughed, then continued. I used it on myself before they could take it. I sealed myself in time, waiting for someone worthy to awaken me. Someone who hadn't been corrupted by greed or guilt. Someone who still believed in family. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Grandpa, I don't understand. What do you want me to do? The screen flickered, and his voice softened. If you open the final chamber, the field will collapse. I will wake, but the energy that sustains this system will destroy everything stored within it. All the records, all the research, all the money tied to the project. The fortune will vanish. The mansion, the yachts, the accounts, everything. You can have the wealth, or you can have me. The monitor went dark. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the hum of the machines. I thought of everything I'd lost, my wife, my job, my home. I thought of the nights I spent sleeping in my car, staring at the ceiling, wondering why life kept taking from me. Now I had a choice. Bring my grandfather back and lose everything material, or walk away with $280 million and let the truth stay buried. I placed my hand on the control panel. The display pulsed softly, waiting for my decision. Family or fortune, I whispered. Tears burned my eyes as I looked at the still form inside the pod. He looked peaceful, like a man who had waited too long for redemption. I pressed the command. A loud alarm blared through the chamber. The lights flickered, machines whirring to life. The pod hissed as its locks disengaged. Steam filled the air. Please, I muttered, shielding my face as the pod cracked open. Through the fog, I saw him stir, fingers twitching, chest rising. Then the power surged. Sparks flew from the console. The walls rumbled. A blinding flash lit the room, and silence swallowed everything. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the cold floor. The hum of the machines was gone. The air smelled of ozone and burnt metal. The pod was empty. And the mansion above? I could already hear the faint rumble of collapse, the sound of wealth evaporating into dust. I stumbled to my feet, coughing, disoriented. Then I heard it, a weak voice behind me. Jacob. He was alive. My grandfather, frail but breathing, lay near the shattered pod. You chose correctly, he whispered. You broke the curse. I knelt beside him, holding his trembling hand. His eyes opened slowly, glinting with tears. The money was never the secret, he said. You were. Then he smiled, peaceful, and closed his eyes one final time. The machines around us dimmed, and sunlight poured through a crack in the ceiling. Beneath the sunrise, I whispered, as the light washed over us both. The fire trucks arrived at dawn. By the time the first responders reached the cliffside mansion, most of it had already collapsed into itself, a blackened skeleton of stone and steel. The Pacific wind howled through the wreckage, scattering ashes like snowflakes. I stood by the gate, wrapped in a blanket, watching smoke curl toward the rising sun. My body ached from exhaustion, but my heart, for the first time in years, it was quiet. They said it was a gas explosion. Old wiring, one firefighter muttered, shaking his head. Lucky you got out alive, sir. Lucky. That word hung in my chest like a whisper from another life. I turned my eyes toward the horizon, where the sunlight spilled over the ocean, golden, endless, alive. Beneath the sunrise. The phrase didn't mean hidden treasure or a secret vault. It meant something deeper, that every ending was just another beginning, if you had the courage to face it. I spent the next few days in a motel on the edge of town. My clothes still smelled of smoke. My hands were blistered from the heat. When I turned on the television, the news was everywhere. California estate explosion destroys historic Martinez mansion. Fortune missing. Reporters speculated about offshore accounts, corruption, missing millions. They didn't know that the real treasure had never been money. Inside my duffel bag, I carried the only thing I'd managed to save, my grandfather's compass. Its brass surface was scratched and tarnished, but the needle still spun perfectly, steady as truth. Every night, I'd sit by the window, holding it in my hand, and remember his last words, "You broke the curse." I didn't fully understand what he meant until I looked in the mirror one morning. The man staring back wasn't the broken version of me who once cried in a car seat under the rain, mocked by the woman who left him. He wasn't the desperate Uber driver who counted gas money and prayed for purpose. He was someone new, not rich, not famous, but alive. A week later, I got a letter. No return address, just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check. Mr. Martinez, as per your grandfather's last will, an undisclosed account has been released in your name. This is a personal gift, separate from the estate and its assets. Use it wisely. HG. The check was for $280,000. Not $280 million, but enough to start over. Enough to mean something. I folded the letter carefully and smiled. Grayson, the attorney, was still out there somewhere, cleaning up the loose ends of a story that most people would never believe. But I didn't need to chase ghosts anymore. I used part of the money to rent a small studio near Santa Barbara. It wasn't much, just a room, a desk, and a view of the ocean. But to me, it was freedom. I started writing again. Not code, not contracts, stories. Real ones. Stories about loss, redemption, and the strange ways the past reaches out to shape the future. Sometimes, when I walked by the shore at sunrise, I could almost feel my grandfather's presence, like the warmth of the morning light brushing my face. He had built machines that could stop time. But in the end, I think he realized the truth. You don't conquer time by freezing it. You conquer it by living, by forgiving, rebuilding, moving forward. One evening, as I sat watching the sunset, an older woman approached me on the pier. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and carried a small leather bag. "Are you Jacob Martinez?" she asked. I turned, startled. "Yes. Do I know you?" She smiled faintly. "You will." Eduardo was my brother. My breath caught. "You're Lucia Martinez," she said. "He wrote to me before he sealed himself away. He said if his grandson ever found the secret, I'd know. And now here you are." She handed me the bag. Inside was a collection of old letters, photographs, and a silver locket. "I think you'll want to read these," she said. They're the last pieces of your family's story. I opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photo of my mother, Maria, holding a baby. Me. Lucia smiled through misty eyes. You were always meant to finish what he started, not by guarding secrets, but by telling them. And then she walked away, her silhouette fading into the orange light. That night, I wrote the final words of the story that had begun with betrayal, despair, and a car parked under a storm. I called it Beneath the Sunrise. It wasn't about money, or revenge, or even redemption. It was about legacy, and how sometimes what we inherit isn't wealth, but wisdom. I published it online under my own name. Within weeks, people started reaching out, strangers who saw themselves in my pain, in my choice, in the fragile hope of rebuilding. Every comment, every message reminded me, even when life burns to ashes, something new always grows beneath the sunrise. Before I go, let me ask you something. If you had to choose between saving someone you love and keeping everything you've ever wanted, what would you do? Would you walk away richer or walk away right? Tell me what you would choose in the comments below. And hey, if Jacob's story touched something in you, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe they've lost something too. Maybe they're sleeping in their car tonight, wondering if it's too late to start over. Remind them it's not. There's always another sunrise. Thanks for watching, and wherever you are in the world, may your next morning bring light, forgiveness, and a second chance.